Morning from Zurich. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Coming up on today's program from Studio 4 here in Zurich, Juliet Linley is here, regular contributor. Also, Marcus Schögel is also joining us from St. Gallen University. But Juliet, we'll start with you. Lots of course, highlighted pages. What do you want to talk about?
Well, guess what? In 120 minutes, Pope Francis will be exiting hospital. He's heading home. Who would have thought it? He's been in hospital for 5 weeks.
And so this is going to be a proper public appearance, do we know, or it's just a waving from the car?
He's going to wave from the balcony of the 10th floor of the Gemelli Hospital, and he will greet and bless the faithful downstairs, and then he will make his way, it's a short car journey, to the Vatican City.
Very good. Also be heading to Vienna for the latest from there.
I'm Alexei Korolyov, Monocle's Vienna correspondent, and I'll be bringing you the latest from Austria.
Plus, we'll be chatting to Francesca Malgara, Artistic Director of the MIA Photo Fair in Milan. It's the 23rd of March, 2025. Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday with Tyler Brûlé.
Indeed, rather soggy Zurich. I have to say, though, it's wonderful to have a very full studio space here. Very full also in the cafe beyond. And I'm very happy to say Marcus Schögel is back around the table. We haven't seen you for a while. School year is almost coming to an end. Another month to go or something?
No. We're right in the middle.
Oh, you're right in the middle of it. Okay. All right. We want to. We have much to talk about in the world of marketing and advertising and propaganda across the program today. So we'll be diving into that for sure. Juliet as well. Very nice to see you. Was the Hanami market yesterday absolutely rammed?
Roaring success.
Right?
Can we say that?
Yeah, we can say roaring. We're allowed to say that. Yes, it was a roaring success.
No, it really was, and the weather was amazing, and everyone was sitting outside having their they weren't yakitoris. What do you call those?
They were yakitoris.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a full yakitori grill. We had onigiri. We had gyoza. We had the whole thing going on.
Matcha flowing.
Yeah. So it was sort of a street takeover, but it wasn't quite the street takeover that we had earlier in the week when we were, of course, in Paris for the official launch of our new setup on Rue Bachemont. I want to bring in Andrew Tuck, our editor-in-chief, is standing by in London this morning. Also, Emma Nelson is there. Both were witness, of course, to the scene. Emma was already talking about sore legs because it was just one of those parties that was like from 7 till 9. But Andrew, it sort of went on to 1:30. I don't think you were there till 1:30. You were there till about 1:15.
I was a little bit wise. I managed to go before the very end. But what a night! What a night! So I think for us, Tyler, that a party is a way to bring people into the fold and do some good hospitality. And there was great Ruinart champagne. There were some Japanese sandos there as well. But what was great, I thought, was just the mix of people who came. We had the heads of luxury houses. We had young designers. We had architects. We had writers. We had authors. We even had a count or two amongst the mix. And it was a good kind of, extrapolation of what Monocle should be, a place where people come together and talk and have fun and discuss things serious and amusing. But an amazing, amazing night.
Emma, you need to maybe paint a picture of then the scene that was happening further back. We should explain that people who know our setup in Zurich, here in Zurich, of course, the radio space is open, of course, and we have about maybe 20 people watching and listening here right now. In Paris, it's more enclosed. Well, it's a totally enclosed space, more of a traditional studio. But if you know which curtain to pull, you can have a little peek in behind. But there was sort of a whole new way of bringing guests in and out of studio, because we have a rather curious setup which we're not sure is going to last in terms of how we're broadcasting from Paris.
The curtains are the thing, Tyler, because you're not quite sure whether you're going to find a wardrobe or a fully functioning broadcast setup, depending on which curtain you pull back. And I had an utterly delightful, if rather surreal experience. We broadcast a lot from Paris this last week. just getting the engine running, taxiing and taking off. We're now happily airborne up in Paris. But we had the Monocle Daily, we had the briefing, we had the Globalist Live, and we had the Daily on air when the party was starting. And so you would have this utterly surreal experience of being on air, doing your job, doing the thing, and then looking out of the door, and the great and the good were coming and literally putting their faces up against the window. It was like being in a funny zoo. And there were these wonderful, wonderful people who were all just waving and genuinely finding it super fun that we don't just have a cafe and we don't just have a shop, but there is go behind the magic curtain and guess what, we have proper radio. And then after we came off air, people were coming into the studio, having a look, putting the headphones on, just basically playing a little bit because it's nice and open. And then we left them to it, and I think they might have turned it into an impromptu drinking hole where they could watch some telly.
Well, Andrew, what is it? What is the fascination about radio? Because one is supposed to listen, but why do people want to watch? Because it is true. Whenever we were out in Dubai recently, etc. This is. It's not a performance piece, but oddly, this medium gets pushed into being a little bit more on stage somehow.
Yeah, and Tyler, just one small note. You also arranged something which I thought was so touching. When we first launched Monocle Radio, Monocle 24 as it was back then, we had the legendary French journalist Christine Ockrent come to London for that first week. And she was an amazing broadcaster, super knowledgeable on everything from politics to culture. And I remember in those early days that she would have a nice glass of red wine after the show. Well, we kind of replicated that. She was there.
Andrew,
she was there in the studio.
What do you mean after the show? What do you mean after the show? The bottle was open on the table the whole time. Not just for Christine, I think for all concerned, but yes.
And there she was again in studio. And it was so great to see her. And that's what radio is about. Radio is about voice, and it's about getting people in the studio. And I think the other amazing thing is, it always strikes me, whether we're in London, Zurich, whether it's a curtain, whether it's a closed door, if you have a room that's nicely soundproofed, where people can come in away from the melee of the street, of the party, and you have an interlocutor who can engage them in a conversation, then suddenly, people forget what's happening outside that room, and they start telling you stories, and they start giving you information in a way that's just so revealing. That doesn't even happen when you have a mic and you're in a room on the street doing vox pops. It's an amazing moment, and that's why I think people love radio. They see in it a chance to be heard in real time, often. Without being edited. They don't have to do hair and makeup. We're not putting people on camera. They come in, and often people say, "Oh, it's not being filmed." Oh, good. And you can see that they're kind of suddenly in the moment again, and they're ready to talk. So that radio is a very special medium for us.
But wait, Emma, Andrew's given us a bit of a cue, though, because hair does come into this, and this comes with our new broadcast setup. So listeners, right now in Zurich, we have radios on microphones on stands. It is sort of a more traditional setup. If you come to the studio in Paris, because we have the metro running right beneath, it is a headset and microphone setup. So more like you would get. In sort of an outside broadcast, or like you'd get also if you were trying to land aircraft as well. And so, Andrew, I don't know if you witnessed this, but Christine was having none of it because, of course, she had to participate in the party. She was not putting that headset atop her coiffure. That was not happening. So it was only, of course, just half of a headset, and then sort of, microphone. I mean, Emma, you witnessed all of this as well, and we know that this is now going to be, significant expense, because I think she was really, in a way, it was just sort of foreshadowing. There's going to be many, I think, also, many a French politician with high hair. They're not going to be putting these things on their heads.
They do hair in France better than arguably
seriously.
Anybody. I mean, look at our Paris bureau chief. He has the most magnificent head of hair, which is actually sort of a conversation topic. But yes, Christine came in with a very, very sharp looking look, and she just went, "No, I'm not wearing those." So we had this marvellous moment when we had our producer Anita Riotta offering to hold the headphones next to her face so she could broadcast. I think maybe she was actually also carrying a glass of champagne, so maybe the thing is that sort of nice relaxed atmosphere is continuing.
Andrew, do you think maybe our CEO needs to put that into the budget, that we also have to have, of course, assistants just to hold the headsets? I don't know what that's going to do for our numbers, but anyway.
I do have some empathy with Christine, because often when I'm in London, I do the radio, and you do get headset hair. You take off the headset and you're walking around the office for the next hour, all fine. Then you go to the washroom and you see you've got like spiky hair, like some kind of bratty 5-year-old, and you wonder what happened. So good on Christine for standing up for the coiffure as well as the journalism.
Andrew, okay, I want to bring you in on this topic right now, and it's something which has really been bubbling up for a little while here in Zurich. It's a topic which, of course, is close to Marcus's heart. Marcus, maybe set this up for us, but this is a story which, if I look at the headline in the NZZ, it says, "Welcome to Pyongyang. The Zurich Left Party severely restricts advertising in public spaces." Tell us what is going on and what potentially might unfold or not unfold on the streets here.
Well, the city of Zurich is pushing forward a motion of banning most of the digital out-of-home advertising, one of the most booming parts of ads right now. And they're trying to extend this to classical advertising, out-of-home advertising. And for me, it rushed into me. We had just this week the Advertiser of the Year award given away, and this news came out a half an hour before the party started. So the party wasn't that big, to be honest, because a lot of people were discussing, because this is cutting away a lot of budget, it's cutting away a lot of audience, it's cutting away a lot of attention. And what struck me most, I mean, ad bans are not new. If you've been to Sao Paulo 20 years ago, they did this with the Ciudad Lipa, with a different reason, and I think this is what we need to talk about later on. But the leftists sort of say, municipality of Zurich said, advertising is bad, it involves pushing people to buy something. This is the reason why they're stopping these ads. And this is an argument that I haven't heard in the Swiss advertising policies for years, because it's more about information and pushing this forward with a sort of, I would almost say, a populist argument that made me get the head up and say, whoa, we need to discuss this.
Yeah, and maybe just on this topic as well. So they're saying, of course, it's bad for the environment because it's encouraging consumption. Second part as well, they're attacking digital advertising because they say that there's this consumption issue as well, because if you have these screens that are on the whole time, of course, that they're sucking power. But it turns out it's not that much power. You're sort of wondering, has anyone then also done the numbers, of course, because listen, I'm all for paper and I'm all for sort of those traditional bus advertisements on the rollers. But then, of course, you've got to print those. You have to have, of course, the man hours of someone to drive the little van around as well to go and put those up. So it all seems rather absurd. But what direction is this going to head? And I'm wondering also, could this, in a way, from a positioning point of view, also just be sort of not the end point, but I think we've sort of seen this ongoing creep here in Zurich of just so much overreach and people saying bureaucrats with nothing else to do, these sort of luxury problems in Switzerland. I mean, now I know they want to also change the traffic pedestrian signs just from having the Ampelmann, the little gentleman walking across the street, to, I mean, every kind of possible creature possible crossing the street as well, at, of course, great expense. So where does this go, Marcus?
For me, from a marketing point of view and business point of view, we're talking about many different ad bans that we're going to see. They're talking about banning alcohol, as they do already. Then we're talking about sweets and all that stuff. So from my point of view, what is happening right now is that you're doing it. There are reasons for doing advertising bans. Information overload. Swiss Railways just redid 10 years ago the whole main station because it was too flown over with information, and we've got an information overload which is with consumers by 99.9%. You don't witness advertising anymore because it's so much, so you don't get the information. And for this reason, I can understand that we do advertising bans or limit the amount of information that we're giving to some people. From my point of view, this whole regulatory stuff is not the way of doing it, because you're taking away choice from consumers, and consumers can choose by themselves. To be honest, I've never seen an ad that really gets a customer to immediately buy something. Well, for a discounter, and I know Emma will jump in on this and say, wait a second, there will be something. But the point for me is that it only informs consumers on certain attitudes that they want to build. They should learn something. And as long advertising helps people to make a choice, you shouldn't limit it. And that's what, from my point of view, should be the starting point for the whole discussion. And it's going to be a referendum in Zurich, and it's going to be interesting to see how the people are voting on this. But from my point of view, the argument comes from the wholly wrong direction. It could be done much more down to earth. And let me tell you a story about Sao Paulo, what happened when they stopped all the advertising. The public spaces were allowed to advertise again, and they raised the prices for this. So there you go. So there's a business sense maybe behind it as well, if you do it properly.
Andrew, just a sort of ongoing march of sort of the infantilization of our urban spaces. Is that part of it? Because, you know, on one side you could say, yes, there's this component of, let's say, just turning down the noise. It's not about really curbing, consumer desire. Maybe this is about cleaning up the environment. We've seen this in many cities, but of course, Sao Paulo was in many ways sort of the global, quite literally the poster child for this. And we've seen other initiatives elsewhere, but maybe viewed from the outside, Andrew, you know Zurich very well. Another luxury problem, as I'm saying, and maybe the city should focus elsewhere, or is there something in this game potentially?
Well, I think, as you're saying, there's nothing wrong with toning down the noise sometimes, and you want to make sure that billboards are put in places where they're acceptable, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that is what happened in Sao Paulo. They felt that billboards were being used to mask factories that were employing low-cost labor, and all sorts of things were being hidden behind the billboards. I know that Nantes in France 2 years ago, they took out a lot of their electronic advertising. They felt it had overwhelmed the city. So there's often a bit of a debate about it. But, we know that, Piccadilly Circus, Times Square, when you're driving along a highway in LA, the use of out-of-home advertising is often a thing of beauty as well. It's part of the characteristic of the place. So there's nothing wrong with outdoor advertising. What gets advertised, of course, as long as it's not obscene, it's not offensive to children, etc., it's fine. It should be enjoyed. I do think there is a little bit of infantilizing around questions of that we see around food and things, but it's going to be hard to stop because you see in these countries that the increasing legislation coming in around healthy diets and trying to control sugar intake. We already have a ban on cigarette advertising and on most alcoholic advertising too. So it's going to be hard to roll back. But yeah, I enjoy the well done out of home advertising. I think done well is beautiful. And oddly in Zurich, the other thing that I really love is just the city's still affection for a great poster pasted up on a poster site. Those things are things which can be charming too.
Juliet.
Speaking of charming, yes. Do you remember here in Zurich, in Paradeplatz, they had these big Edelweiss posters. It was like, leave 9 to 5, love time off, leave work, love flow. I didn't jump on my app to book an Edelweiss flight, but it does give you sort of this breath of fresh air to this beautiful tropical island looking all very peaceful. But speaking of luxury problems, as you said, I mean, city coffers are going to take a hit of 30 million francs, I was reading, if they do institute this ban. But apparently that doesn't seem to be a problem, super easy. And then more than 5,000 people, Marcus, they work in Zurich on advertising and in market research. So there's a cost to that too. And if I'm not mistaken, Marcus, there is a moratorium in any case on new digital ads until 2030 in any case in the city. So we're going to have to see what the Zurich people actually do vote in the referendum.
Yeah, and sometimes you can rely on the people. In many cases, the Swiss voted against 2 weeks more vacation. They didn't want it, so that would not happen in Germany and Italy. So they're very cautious, I think, of their life and how to live it. The other thing that I think is then they want to ban especially climate damaging airlines and all that stuff. So they're going directly into being directive into the business. And this really makes me, being a liberal really nervous in the idea, European liberal, sorry, that makes me really nervous because it doesn't help at all in any kind of cases. And the problem is, it's not only the single advertising, it's the campaigns. When you go out of home, you go digital, you go into any kind of integrated campaign, you're missing out on the one part where you might want to touch the people more emotionally than with a search ad on Google and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Juliet's not going to get her Edelweiss delight moment as well, thinking about how she's going to escape from her family. So
no, but also, how do you discern? I mean, they said that you will allow cultural advertisements, but not, let's say, polluting airlines.
You do the difference.
But they gave the example of the Cirque du Soleil. It's a circus, therefore cultural. But what if it's
but also for profit
Air Canada as a sponsor?
Well, correct.
And they've got the CO2 footprint as well when they're doing their shows.
Yeah, they travel around.
I believe so. Andrew, just Emma had the end news story about this proposal for potentially 500 new pedestrian streets in Paris. We, as we said, the evening carried on Wednesday night into Thursday morning, out onto a semi-pedestrianized street. And I was wondering, is that the model that we're talking about? Because oftentimes we've been chronicling over the years the rise of pedestrianization. And as we know, some pedestrianized zones also turn into dead zones as well. After hours, no traffic going by, etc. Feral youth running around, etc. And I'm just wondering what your take is on that proposal, and just given your urbanist perch, is there a right way that Paris should be looking at it? And I guess when we're talking about Rue Bachemont, where we are, taxis can still go down the street, obviously delivery vehicles, etc., and then there's bike traffic, etc. For Paris, a wonderfully green street as well. But do you look sort of aghast when they say, okay, let's go headlong and do another 500 streets in the city, and whether your sense of if it's also working, someone who has to get in and out of Paris as well?
Well, it was interesting because we raised the topic of how nice the neighbourhood is around Rue Bachemont when we were on radio. And actually, it was Christine that said you have to recognise that lots of Parisians are upset about the taking away of the ability just to drive down all of the streets in this neighbourhood. But I think there, in that sector, they had got the balance right, as you said. So what was interesting is, the party spilled out onto the street. The neighbours didn't complain. It was a tolerant neighbourhood of a fun party. But as taxis and actually as a dust truck, whatever, a garbage truck came down the street, people stepped out of the way, and all of the drivers seemed to be smiling and laughing, and a few waved as well. So there was no aggression. There was a nice kind of merry dance between pedestrians and vehicles in that instance. And you are only two roads away from a quite busy, fast boulevard where traffic can flow. So I think in that area, they've got it right. Let's see what happens, because, like you, I think that some streets work well when they're pedestrianized, and you see life spill out onto the streets, and you sense that it works well. But certainly in London, some areas which are completely pedestrianised are a bit grotty. They become the obvious places for people who are sleeping rough to go to. So then they put in benches that you can't sit on properly. And there becomes a cycle of how to keep people moving through these spaces. And also there's something about sound that really echoes in an empty street. So often on a street where people were tolerant of a bit of traffic noise because there was a bit of background bars and people standing outside bars, when there's all gone and it's just somebody having a conversation in the street, suddenly just that enough is something that riles people. So again, it's a merry dance done well, a good streetscape, and it's making sure that everybody has a right to kind of get up and party, as it were.
Maybe not quite getting up and party, Juliet, but there will be an appearance. Speaking of getting it back out on the street, Pope Francis is going to be exiting the hospital over the coming hour, it seems, after quite a long stint, and will be going into a period of rest. They're saying 2 months, not 2 months off, but 2 months of taking it easy. What does taking it easy look like in the Vatican?
Coming from a gentleman who is known to be quite a workaholic and he didn't want to be hospitalized when they actually managed on February 14th to put him in hospital for what then became double pneumonia. You can't imagine him just lying in his bed, not wielding any of his papal authority, which he has been doing even from his hospital bed over these last 5 weeks. So it's going to be interesting even just to see him when he does. He's going to make a blessing, they said, and he's going to greet the faithful at midday today because he hasn't been seen since Valentine's Day. We've heard him, and it was a very sort of disconcerting audio message that they put out. He sounded breathless. He was speaking in Spanish, and it didn't sound good. We saw a photo of him. They released one photo of him taken from behind, so you couldn't even see how swollen his face is, his expression or anything. He's released a letter to the editor of Corriere della Sera in which he was calling for world peace and for disarmament. So people are going to be curious but also concerned to see what does he look like and is he going to be able to continue in his position. Analysts are saying he's been controlling the optics and the narrative from his hospital bed over these past 5 weeks. He will definitely be doing that. On April the 7th or 8th, he's due to meet King Charles and Camilla at the Vatican. So far, that is on track. Let's see if that stays. And then it'll be, of course, Easter week. And there are a lot of appuntamenti that the Pope would usually be taking on. So let's see how if we get messages, if we see him, if we get recordings from him. I doubt that he will be celebrating Mass because that's within the 2 months of rest and recuperation that are due.
Andrew, just before we go, and just before we head back to over to Emma with the news, you have a busy 48 hours before the May issue ships off. And it's crazy because most listeners have not even seen the April issue yet. But we have, because of Salone del Mobile in Milan, we have a bit of a compressed timeline. We want to get the May issue out on newsstand, at least in Italy, beforehand, maybe because also the Pope is going to want to redecorate. He's had a bit of an epiphany, maybe when he gets back to the Vatican, so he needs that May issue. What are we wrapping up on? What's the main thematic?
Well, it's the Design Awards in the next issue, and Nick Manise has been busy picking the 50 winners for that. And I've seen the pages, and of course, and they look amazing. We also have a really brilliant expo, which is about places of contemplation in this harried world. How do you find a place which helps you think clearly, and an amazing shoot all around the world. I went to MIPIM. I managed to get a few words on page this issue too. But yeah, so we're finishing that tomorrow. Tuesday, you're in town. We're having a special event for staff. Actually, tomorrow night.
Tomorrow, yes.
Tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, careful.
Okay, but tomorrow night, if you're a member of the Ned Club here in London, there's a big urbanist special talk at the Ned tomorrow night with a dinner for some of the team there, and then on Wednesday, back to Paris, Tyler.
I know, exactly. So I'm looking at our Jonathan Ducret is well, he's sitting front row, as he always is, and will be part of the merry troupe that will be, of course, joining us in Paris for our patrons' dinner. Andrew, I'll see you tomorrow in London. Emma Nelson, I'll see you as well, but right now you have the news headlines for us.
Much indeed, Tyler. The Vatican says Pope Francis will be discharged from hospital later today after 5 weeks. He's been treated for pneumonia. He'll offer a blessing from his window at the Gemelli Hospital in Rome before returning to the Vatican, where he's been instructed to rest for 2 months. The mayor of Istanbul, a main rival to Turkey's President Erdogan, has been told he will remain in jail pending the outcome of corruption charges. Ekrem İmamoğlu was detained last week, prompting widespread protests. Jamaica is at the halfway point of its transition to becoming a republic, according to the country's Minister for Legal Affairs. He says the bill to remove the UK King as head of state is now going through the parliamentary stages. Parisians vote in a referendum today to decide whether an extra 500 of the city's streets should be pedestrianised and greened. If approved, 10,000 extra parking spots in Paris will also be eliminated. And the body of a passenger jet is to be transformed into a visitor cafe in Southampton. The plans show sets of tables and chairs set out in a BAC 111 aircraft fuselage at the Solent Sky Museum, accommodating around 30 visitors, including 2 seats in the cockpit. Those are the headlines. Back to you, Tyler, in Zurich.
Emma Nelson, that's your coming weekend sorted. I would imagine you're going to be heading down to what's it called? The Solent Sky Park? What is it?
Solent Sky Museum.
Sky Museum. I believe probably at least someone in your household is going to want to drag you down. Or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you're going to be leading the way.
Seriously, I want to get straight down into the planning areas. I want to make sure that when we are just about to eat our food, there is turbulence, so we have to stop eating or we don't get anything. I want to absolutely focus on the hospitality aspect of this one, because I know you said I was quite clipped this morning. Well, in another life, I probably could have well have been cabin crew. I want to see whether you were like, could you finish your tea now, sir, please? Could you sit down now, sir? I think there's scope for an awful lot of fun of this, but I also just want to go back on a 111.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even, maybe I flew in a BAC 111 once, but yeah, I can remember those. I think they were probably last flying around Gatwick with Dan Air, I believe. But anyway,
I think that was on that plane. Yes,
it could have been. Emma will try to catch you before the end of the show. We're heading now to Vienna. Our correspondent is there, Alexei Korolyov. Guten Morgen. Very nice to have you, Alexei.
Good morning, Tyler.
My goodness, it's very loud in Vienna this morning. Listen, where do we want to start? You have, of course, looks like the makings of it, well, maybe not even functioning, but something that resembles a government, a record period of coalition building. Maybe just bring us up to speed in terms of what things look like in the seat of power for the Austrian Republic.
Right, yeah. I hope I'm not too loud now.
No, all good.
Right, so yeah, we finally got a new government in the early days of March, and these had been the longest coalition negotiations, indeed, in the country's modern history. And for a while, for about a month and a half or so, for most of January and half of February, it looked like we might get a far-right head of state. So there were lots of commentary, lots of radio programs, lots of articles in the press, including by me, about how Austria might get its first far-right leader since the Second World War, and what that might lead to. And then it unraveled in record time. It didn't happen. And I think there is now, because of this sort of tentative sense of, if not optimism, then relief in Austria. We got a new government. It's a centrist government, and the sort of the threat of the far right has been averted. And at the risk of sounding wildly partial, I have to say that this may serve as a lesson for governments elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere in the world. That yes, the far right are growing in popularity, are growing in power. But what these coalition negotiations showed, when the far right were leading them, was that they're not capable of dialogue, they're not capable of compromise, and the reason that these negotiations led by the far right unraveled was because they just it wasn't because of their policies, because the policies they advocate and the policies they wanted to enact, they have sort of become the mainstream now in Europe, but they just wanted so much power. They wanted so much of the government. They wanted so many ministries that their coalition negotiation partner, the People's Party, the Conservatives, they just couldn't put up with it. And so it just went to show that you just can't talk to them. And so it led, sorry for this very long introduction, so it led to the creation of this new current government. It's a centrist government. It's Austria's first three-party government since the Second World War. And it is customary to measure a new administration's progress by the sort of the 100-day mark. It's something that began with President Roosevelt in the US. I didn't know this. But I think because these negotiations and the wait for this new government had been so long, there's already been so much commentary on the progress of this new government. They haven't done much, it's true, but they have done something already. The Social Democrats are back in national government. They're one of the parties in this coalition. They now have control of the finance ministry. They have announced a rent freeze, for example, for certain categories of flats, because Austria's been struggling with inflation, with, as the world in general, cost of living crisis. So there's the rent freeze there, and they've announced a number of policies aimed at sort of reducing this burden on the population, and people have been very thankful for that. And it does, to return to my original point, there is this sense of relief. There is this sense of optimism that in a world where, we're seeing protests everywhere now. There's protests in Turkey, as we've heard. There are protests in neighboring Hungary, in Slovakia, everywhere, in Serbia as well. And we had our share of protests as well here in Austria. But now there is this sense of calm. Now we're back to business, back to normality.
Well, maybe back to normality, but I'm wondering also in terms of also a beacon in terms of, maybe a greater reset in terms of course, the role that Vienna has played as a hub of creativity, as a gathering point, of course, of the enlightened, of intellectuals, etc. Not that we're going to get there, but it's interesting. Richard Cockett, correspondent and editor at the Economist, he has a book out, Vienna: How the City of Ideas Created the Modern World, and I'm wondering how much that's become a beacon as well. Oftentimes it's wonderful when someone from the outside, who's of course been a bit of an insider, shines a light on a place. You spoke to him, and I'm wondering if that has also ignited something in a very positive way as well, in terms of, what does that new direction of travel for, of course, a Vienna which has to also reposition itself. Yes, it's a United Nations city. It's of course its proximity to some more tenser corners of Europe. And I wonder what your reflections are on your discussion with him.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to talk to Richard, and it was so he came here. He came to Vienna to do a lecture about the book, just as the German language edition of the book came out. And one of the first things he said in the lecture and then in the interview when I talked to him was that, no Austrian would ever call their book "How the City of Ideas Created the Modern World" because it's wildly modest. No Austrian would ever claim that sort of special role for Vienna or for any city. And it did indeed, as you say, I did ask him, did him being an outsider, did that give him any sort of special insight into or a new perspective? And he said, indeed, yes, because you need to be outside to see those things in the round. And then essentially what the book is about, I'll just give you a brief description of what the book is about, is how at the beginning of the 20th, so from sort of the early 1900s until the Nazi takeover of Austria in 1938, Vienna gave birth to this new world of creativity and scientific thought. And there were many, many people like Sigmund Freud, for example, that are known, of course, or Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher, but also many, many others who created whole areas of knowledge and new scientific fields that we now take for granted, but they didn't exist at the time. And that was the sort of the result of how the Austrian education system was and how sort of Vienna's cultural milieu worked at the time. All of those people talked to each other, all those people met each other all the time, because Vienna still is a small city, so they saw each other on a daily basis, all those people, Freud and so on. And in those conversations and in those discussions, they gave birth to these new fields of ideas, like, for example, obviously psychoanalysis with Sigmund Freud, but also tangentially Sigmund Freud's nephew in America, Edward Bernays, famously created the modern advertising industry. And then lots of other things, management studies, and childcare and so on, and then modern design as well. There was famous, one of the first, I think, certified, or if not the first certified woman architect in Austria, Margareta Schutter-Lihotzky, who created the precursor to the modern kitchen, the Frankfurt kitchen. She did it in Frankfurt, but she did come from Austria originally. And so, but then, of course, as the Nazis approached, all of those people left Austria, and then they went to live in America or in the UK, where they continued what they were doing in Vienna. And so, John von Neumann's work on the Manhattan Project, for example, all of that came from this world of creativity in Vienna. And then, interestingly, in my interview with Richard and in the talk that he'd given before, obviously, the question that was put to him was, do you see this same potential in Austria and in Vienna today, that Vienna can again be this sort of hub of creativity? That is the burning question for Austrians right now. His answer is, of course, it's hard to say. You never know. This was just a very incredible confluence of so many circumstances and so on that led to the creation of that world of creativity at the beginning of the 20th century. And whether we ever going to get anything resembling that ever in Vienna or elsewhere is anyone's guess.
Alexei Korolyov, our correspondent in Vienna. Thank you very much for that. Have a very good Sunday. Marcus, I want to bring you in on this because just before we went on air, we have part of Juliet's extended family here in the audience, and we were talking about, of course, let's say not just centers of higher education, but also where those schools are based. And it's interesting listening to Alexei, of course, talk about, how Vienna was this magnet, a center of great ideas. Of course, so much of it driven from a very strong academic base as well. When you talk to your students now, so of course, graduating, also looking to maybe, of course, extend their studies. Marcus, where are people going post St. Gallen? Where do they want to be?
It depends a little bit. If they're having their bachelor studies, they either stick to a university or they go to places. In fact, Vienna is one of the best German-speaking universities in business. It's the Vienna University and it's Wirtschaftsuniversität. And they're sort of our benchmark. So we're a little bit competing against them. And they're really well set up. They're really good in what they're doing. And on the other hand, there are some places here in Europe that are really up and coming. And one of my favorites is the Nova in Lisbon, close to Lisbon. That's one of the business schools that I think that is really offering a unique value proposition. It's right at the beach.
Yeah,
the students, they have their own lockers for their surfboards. And this is a signal, I think, that work-life balance is not only within the classroom and at the party, but maybe on the beach as well. So, and they are doing very well in research. They're doing very well in education. And these are places that are coming up more because, the choices are getting bigger and the distances to travel to get an education, they are getting easier in Europe at least. So I think London as well, London School of Economics, Madrid, Barcelona, Bocconi, these are the places where our students are looking for, or the students from there are coming to us.
Yeah, well, I just maybe going back to Nova and Lisbon as well. So aside from, yes, I think there's even a tunnel for students to the beach. It's an extraordinary setup that they have, but also from I would say a curriculum perspective, from a management perspective as well. This was a school that was really sort of also born out of not just Portuguese corporations, international corporations as well, really driving the funding for the school. That this was not a state creation, and maybe in many ways it was the school sort of had its rise partly because of the crisis in Portugal. That you had Portugal, the Lusophone Incorporated, Europe Incorporated, wanting to get behind a school like this. So what I've just heard as well is just the rigor of real business behind the school has also been very important.
Yeah, but that's familiar to me as St. Gallen has the same roots. But I think this is something where you see how important science is, and not only business, economics, and all these science are for business and for investments. And I think that when companies join in and they are for freedom of research, then I think we're on a good track here in Europe.
And maybe what is the friction between, of course, what does the school offer versus, of course, as you said, we can talk about beaches with big surf as well. I mean, you touched on also, let's say, the rise of Bocconi as well. I think we could have had this conversation around this microphone 7 or 8 years ago. And would you have had as many international students as excited about going to Bocconi? But now you talk to people all over Europe and they're looking to Milan.
Bocconi has built a strong reputation in research in the last years. They have a very strong academic background, and they're offering what I would call a very classic education that is very much based on textbooks and really giving you the scientific rigor that I think is very important when you go into business. And on the other hand, they've got a perfect MBA program that is running now for many years, and being in Milan, it has a close connection to the fashion industry as well. So they are rooted as well pretty good in the regional part. But all of them, what you see is that the academics are getting more and more mobile. You get a more global network of researchers that are staying in certain parts of Europe. And this makes it even a more localized space to study. And this is, I think, what you could do perfectly in Milan and in Lisbon and in London and sometimes in St. Gallen as well. Yeah, sure.
Juliet, are you advocating for your kids to...
Madrid, we're looking at.
Oh, you're looking at Madrid?
Yeah,
no Bocconi?
No, too close to home. They grew up in Italy, so you go abroad, and I think Madrid is perfect.
Perfect. Anyway, we're going to go to Milan anyway, because we're talking to Francesca Malgara now. She's joining. She's the artistic director at the MIA photo exhibition, photo fair in Milano, which is on right now. Buongiorno, Francesca.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Well, of course, yes. We can hear you. Everyone can hear you all over the world.
Thank you.
Tell us this edition of MIA, multiple programs, of course, and focus. But if you could distill it for our listeners who want to jump on a train, jump on a plane, jump in the car, and visit, tell us about this year's edition.
Yes, this is the 14th edition of the fair. We're very happy. We're back to where we started, actually, in this design area of Milan, this district area in Via Tortona. And it's in very nice spaces. This year we have a new theme, which actually I've started 2 years ago. And it's dialogues, which encompasses the conversations between artists, public, diverse cultures, historical and contemporary photography. And so it's a great opportunity to see many things. We have 77 galleries this year, plus 37 other projects. So it's 114 exhibitors. And this past 4 days has been a great success, and we're very, very happy. Many people coming, and so glad. We're very, very glad, and it's becoming international. I think Milan is also helping, because Milan in the past few years has really changed and helping us to grow together.
Maybe let's just focus on the exhibitors first, because oftentimes, as you said, the internationalization of an exhibition, of course, is also the marker of its success. So if you break it down, how much is domestic? Of course, Italian exhibitors coming from Torino, coming from Rome, versus, of course, people traveling in across the border.
Well, so let's say that we still haven't reached. High level of people coming from traveling, especially for this, because I think we still need to grow, but it's a good 30% of people traveling from outside. And we also try to do this through a focus, because we have various sections in the fair, and every year we try to give, we host a country, and actually this year is Switzerland. So we have several people coming from Switzerland to visit the fair, also through our VIP program. So many collectors invited from us, and we are starting to see people coming from London, from Holland, from Belgium, plus all the new international people living in Milan, because we're starting to become a good attraction. So many foreigners coming, but I mean, not traveling, let's say, but walking from their homes in Milan. And it's still, let's say, it's still 70% Italian, 30% international, to give numbers.
And just from a positioning as well, because the world now, of course, is starting to, if they're not already coming to your fair, they're certainly mobilizing and getting ready to make their way to Milan, because, of course, Salone del Mobile is coming up. We're 2 weeks out from the start of Salone. How important is the positioning for you as well, just having that proximity, this lead-in moment? And maybe just when we were talking, as you heard a little bit earlier, about as you said, also just the power of Milan, the transformation that is happening and has been happening in Milano as well. How much of that thinking is also completely joined up? How much is the city, I would say the tourism management, the cultural management, really thinking about, of course, the programming that occurs to make sure that there is this buzz and glow around Milano?
Yes, it's very important, obviously, to have to collaborate with the city of Milan, and they are trying to organize, I would say, every week something for the city. To be honest, I prefer to stay a little bit separate from Salone del Mobile, and there is also another art fair, because otherwise it becomes a little bit too much for the city and the people gets distracted. And Salone del Mobile is it's such a huge event for the city that all the rest in a way disappears, because it really, I don't know, I'm sure you have been to the Salone and how it has been grown in the past years. Yes, it's just incredible. You have thousands and thousands of people coming from everywhere in the world, I would say. So a fair like mine, which is hosts in total, I would say 25,000 people in 4 days. It's nothing compared to what arrives in the city for the Salone in a week, which is probably we're talking about numbers of 400,000 people coming to the city. So it's a completely different numbers, but it helps. It helps because we are growing as a city, and we culturally, and especially the art, we have many foreign galleries opening their doors and trying to find new spaces in Milan. And I think that is because international people are choosing to live here. So it's a collaboration. And we are, and obviously photography is it's not it's compared to the rest of the world, it hasn't got a big market, and it's also our responsibility to educate, because in the fair we don't only sell, but we also create cultural programs, awards, and we also invite institutions to participate in order to educate the public to understand what it is, photography.
Francesca Malgara from MIA in Milano, thank you very much. The fair, of course, wraps up end of day today. So if you're inbound to Milan or in Milano, then please do pay a visit. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday. We're almost at the end of the program, but I wanted to go back to where we were starting a little bit earlier. Marcus, Juliet, you picked up on the story, but we were talking about, of course, what is potentially on the horizon with this curbing of course, advertising or out-of-home advertising digitally. As digitally based, at least to start. But also we have another story right now, which of course is, could we be moving to a world of potentially alcohol bans, of certainly a lot of disclaimers on bottles potentially. Marcus, this is your beat. Do you think this is a world that we're heading towards? And again, it's already occurring to some extent in some markets.
Well, I think there's something to that idea that you need to take care a little bit more of the alcohol world. On the other hand, the story of alcohol is longer than tobacco with our humans, and here, especially here in Europe. And of course, you need some regulations. But what we've learned over years, until a cigarette pack really gets somebody drawn him away from buying it, the dissonance that people have in mind, they are so big that a lot of these ads and the bans will not take people away from the alcohol in the first day. It maybe take them more than a decade to change the idea and the habits, which is much more efficient in taking away the advertisings, from my point of view.
Juliet, do you feel threatened? Are you sort of, papering over, tearing out ads for Moet, Ruina out of magazines? So you youngsters who've never exposed to alcohol otherwise, I'm sure, never see these ads.
What I think is interesting is how this... they're drinking so much more in moderation, let's say, or apparently they are. And a lot of it is due to social media. Interestingly enough, if you're looking chubbier or not as glowy, then you're going to get less likes. And we all know that perhaps with a hangover, you don't look as glowy on your Instagram feed. So that apparently is a bit of a deterrent to why they're
But you can doctor that anyway, though, right?
That is true. You have a lot of filters. I know you use those Snapchat filters
Always.
that
You
put
should
hearts
see.
and sparkles all over. No, but also people say, well, with these kind of polls, which are showing these massive drops, don't forget that people lie about their alcohol consumption. So maybe it isn't so worrying, although alcohol stocks have taken a bit of a hit over the last years. And also some were saying that sales of alcohol might not be so high, but that might be because we're still going through the stocks of booze that we bought during the pandemic. Do you remember that whole lockdown thing of like, let's all hoard our alcohol. We don't know how long this will last. So there you go. They still have those stocks, Marcus.
Well, I was going to say, and also just having...
yours are depleted.
Well, no, I just coming from Toronto as well, where all US booze has been removed from shelves as well. Are you having your Canadiano?
I'm going to have one right now. I'm skipping the matcha latte to have a Canadiano.
Yeah. So just everyone is lobbying now that we get rid of Americanos in the cafe and we only have Canadianos. We'll see about that. We're going to have to leave it there. Marcus, very nice to see you. Hopefully
Thanks for having me again.
We'll see you before the end of the academic year. Juliet, you're around the corner, always, right?
See you all the time.
Absolutely. Also, very big thanks to our Andrew Tuck, Alexei Korolyov for us in Vienna, also Francesca Malgara from me in Milano. Our producers today, Emma Nelson, the very clipped and efficient one, also Desiree Banley, and of course, Mariella Bevan was looking after the audio for us in London. I'm Tyler Brûlé. I am back next week. As well. I know I'm not. I'm going to be joining from Venice anyway, but someone else will be manning the fort for us, usually Emma Nelson. Have a good week, everyone. Goodbye.